Hi everyone, thanks for joining us again for another Plum Good quilting tutorial. Today we're going to talk about this Christmas tree quilt and all of the ideas that you can make with this particular tree block. We've had this on Pinterest for a while. We've had it on our quilt gallery for a really long time because I made it a few years ago and ended up giving one to all the neighbors for Christmas. It was so quick and so simple. And as you're going to find out when you get started, you're going to end up with a ton more trees than you intended to have when you began your project. This is one of those that's going to be difficult for the traditional quilters. There's absolutely no measurements going on in this thing, so it's all about the look of the fabric that you like and the appeal that you want to get from your finished product. As you can tell here on this one, I made it a little bit Christmassy, but it's also could be rest of the year quilt as well. It just has regular neutrals and just there's a few Christmassy greens in there, but most of them are just like a regular tree green. And then also this is the latest project I've done with it, and I added some trapunto, and this one is definitely Christmas. Every fabric in it is very Christmassy. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you need to do when you're making one of these is decide the basic height of your tree. On this particular project over here, I started out with an 8 or a 9-inch tree, and what I mean by that is the base of the tree from here to here, not necessarily the height. So what you need to do for this project, if you're doing the quilt, you need about 3 yards of neutrals and you need 2 yards of different greens. In my opinion, you need at least 8 greens and at least 12 to 15 neutrals. And you'll understand why in just a minute. Now with the small Christmas project, I was able to do it with 5 greens and 10 different neutrals. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll explain as we go along why you need different fabric requirements, okay? Well, the first thing I thought was, when I made this original quilt here, fat 8s were not popular, but in my opinion, fat 8s are the perfect solution for this quilt because it enables you to have tons of variety and basically the perfect amount of fabric that you need in each variety. What we're going to do here is, let's start with either an 8 or a 9-inch in height. Like I said, it's preference. It's all about how tall you want your trees. These trees originally were a 10 or 11-inch tall tree. These trees originally were like an 8-inch tree with a 7-inch across at the base. So what you want to do is have a basic 2-inch difference between, if the height of your tree is 8 inches, you probably want it to be only 6 or 7 inches wide at the base of the tree, because that way it's easier to gauge how much fabric you're going to need. Okay, the first thing I did here was, as you can see, I've already cut this one. I started out, I took my stack, and in this case, I used fat 8s for the greens, but I had, for the neutrals, I had a lot on the bolt. So I went ahead and cut 8-inch with the fabric strips like this, and then I went ahead and I put them in a stack together because you can't cut them all at one time. Same thing with the greens. I did that and I just stacked them up. Now originally this was my stack from doing the small quilt here, so I only had 5, but you want at least 8 for a large quilt and more. When I did this original one, I used tons of scraps. I really didn't have measurements. I just kept putting them in there so I could make as many trees as I wanted to make. So let's go ahead and get started, and I'll show you kind of how this grows exponentially. With the greens, as you can see here, I basically, this is almost with the fabric. I had taken these off for this project, remember. So what I did was take your whatever ruler, or you can eyeball it. Seriously, you can eyeball it. If you get it way skinnier or way fatter at the base of the tree, it's not going to matter. It may cause you to have less or a few more blocks in the end, but hey, it's all about what you're wanting it to look like, and the more variety you have, the better. So what I did when I cut this was I kind of went, okay, let's eyeball that. Well, this one, I've got basically 20 inches here because I cut it 20 inches across this way, and remember I had an 8-inch strip tall, but you can do 8, 9, 10, however high, whatever height you want. And okay, let's eyeball it with the ruler here. Okay, that's 7 inches. So you just kind of eyeball and slice. And look over here, and yeah, that looks pretty good, and slice it. And just keep doing that down your row. There is no such thing as a screw up on this, I promise. As you can see here, okay, these are pretty fat at the bottom. It's all good. But by the time I got down to the end of my row, they're pretty skinny. I mean, this one might even be 5 inches at the base, and you might think this is unusual on this one, but it's not, because you may need some toppers later, and you just want some skinny trees, or maybe you want to make a pillow to go with your quilt, and you need a smaller tree to begin with. So, okay, now that we've cut our trees, let's go ahead and get these out of the way, and I'll show you how you do the background fabric. So, as you can see here, think about this. It was 20 inches wide across, and these were only fat 8 size. These weren't double width of fabric. And I was able to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stacks of trees. Well, there's 5, so 5 times 6 is 30. So there's 30 trees right there. That's a lot. That is a lot. And with this quilt here, I got, with each quilt I made, I ended up somewhere between 27 and 34 tree blocks out of this much fabric. So, just gives you an idea there. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about our neutrals. With your neutrals, what you're going to do is, if you have a tree block that is a tree that is 8 inches tall, then you need your blocks for your neutrals to be at least what your tree height is. Now, it sounds funny because you think, okay, it's going to kind of cut off the top of your tree, but it doesn't, and I'll show you why in just a minute. As you can see with the old quilts, I made the background fabric the same height as my tree. Well, look, it left no room there. There's probably maybe less than an inch at the top of my tree to fit into the seams with my sashings. Now, when I did my Christmas tree quilt, I originally made these trees, the background fabric was a good 2 inches taller, because originally, see, you can tell there's more room here. Originally, I was thinking I might embroider across here some Christmas stuff, and then I changed my mind later. But the thing is, that would be your only, you know, one way or another, your reason about whether you'd want your blocks for your background fabric to be bigger. If not, just go with the flow. 8-inch tall tree, 8-inch tall block for your background fabric. Now, here's, if you do not plan to do all of your backgrounds in the same color fabric, here's the trick for the background to get what you need and to make sure that your variety is all around your quilt rather than ending up with a lot of the same fabric on the same trees. Let's go ahead and move this neutrals, my big stack, out of the way here. Okay. When you're making the big quilt, this is why you want at least 12 fabrics. If you'll look at each of these trees here, you can tell that most of the time I try to have a different fabric on either side of each tree piece. And sometimes they lined up where I ended up with the same fabric on the same side, and this is why. Okay. Each of these background blocks is actually the same side, for the same side of the tree. So you take your tree here, and this block has been cut, and I'll show you how in just a second. As you can see, it's that side of the tree. But here's the problem. It can't be this side of the tree as well, because you're going to lose block width, so it has to go here. So because of that, you need to cut 2 stacks just like this so that you'll have corresponding right and left sides for your trees. So here's what you would do. If you have an 8-inch tree, you want an 8-inch block or larger. And you need, like I said, you really need at least 12 or more. So what you might do is take six of the fabrics and put them in this stack, and 6 of the fabrics and put them in this stack, or you can mix them a little bit more than that. Then what you need to do, this is the only measurement in the whole thing outside of whatever size you want your trays. Regardless of what size your block is, you must cut it in this direction. You must cut 2 inches in on either corner. So on this, for the tree pieces that are going to go on the right hand side of your tree, for that block you need 2 inches in from this right lower corner and 2 inches in from the top left corner, and slice. Now on your other stack you do it the exact same way, but you need to do it, with your 2 inches in, but you need to do it the opposite direction. So you want this one, see here, 2 inches in on your bottom left corner and 2 inches in on your top right corner for your slice. So now what we have is, let's take a tree block, let's take a tree. Now what we have is, ta-da, here's your left and a right sides for your tree. Now what you'd want to do is go ahead and, like I said, just mix and match. You're going to take your 2 stacks that you're going to have lots of tree. You want to do the same thing. And like I said, this is one reason why you want to swap them up, because look what's happening here already. You've got both left sides of these 2 trees have that same fabric. So when you cut them, you're going to end up with what I did here instead of having as much variety. So that's why you want as much variety in your neutrals as possible. So anyway, go ahead and keep stacking them up. Get them all mixed and matched the way you want them. And you just putting, like I like to put mine on my cutting board like this, or a piece of cardstock. Take them to the sewing machine and sew, and before you know it, you're going to have a ton of tree blocks. Okay, and this is what it looks like once you've sewn them together. So, and I like to press my seams open. I know you are all gasping in horror at that, all you traditional quilters, but we were doing clothing before quilting, and it just seems more natural. So what you want to do here is go ahead and sew up this side, and sew all the way up. Now I left this on so that you could see that you'll have to trim it. So once you have these done, I would go ahead and press, bring it back to the board here, trim all your little tails off, just like that, all done. Okay, perfect. Now, remember when you put your tree together, your 2 inch cut, where you have your 2 inch slice, is going to be at the bottom of the tree every time, just so you know you're getting it on there correctly. And you'll be able to tell really fast, because what will happen is, if you swap one of these neutral sides upside down where your 2 inches up here, you're going to have a really skinny, you're not going to have much block space on either the right or the left side of your tree, and you'll kind of have a mess. So, okay. Now, here's the next part. After you've sewn all those together, you can use your ruler if you want to, or you can go ahead and just do it freehand. I will tell you, I like to cut across the bottom with my ruler and get this straight first. See what I did? I sliced straight up all across, because when you go to put your tree trunk on later, it gives you a really good indication of how tall your tree is at the time, and you're not having to slice that later on. So now what you want to do is decide how many times you want to cut it. It's all up to you. As you can see, when I did this quilt, I made lots of cuts. Sometimes I cut my trees 5 times. Well, all that means is you're going to end up with shorter trees, and you're going to keep having to add pieces, but then again you get more variety on some of the trees. Now when I did the wall hanging, I only cut 3 times on each tree. So here's what you do. Like I said, if you're really particular, use your ruler. If not, cut. And I mean, you just slice them up, and they're all going to be crazy like this. Okay? Now, after you've cut them like this, you're going to take all your stacks of trees, and you're just going to mix and match all your different tree blocks together. Then you're going to re-sew them together and just mix them and match them just like I did here. Then you're going to sew across. Then when you get all of your blocks done, then you'll square them up. You eyeball it to see which one is the smallest block, and you square them up. Now, once you've eyeballed to see which is the smallest and you kind of got them like you want to go ahead and do your trunk. Now, with the trunks, you can use one fat quarter and it will do a whole quilt. You only need a tiny little piece for your trunk, or you can do some mix and match on that as well. Now, all you need to do also is just take a neutral, and see, I like to mix mine once again, so make 2 or 3 or 4, however many you need for whatever height, and just randomly sew your trunk piece in the middle of 2 neutrals. Then once like I said, once these trees are sewn back together randomly, go ahead, sew your trunk piece on there again. Then get all your blocks squared up how you like them, and then just do fun placement to figure out which ones are going to go where. As you can see, when I placed them together, these blocks in this center column tended to be more like 8.5 inches wide, I think, and so these are quite a bit skinnier, so I made sure they went in the same columns. Just mix and match, and you can put it however you like it together. Now, when I did this one over here, I will tell you, this is the tricky part with the yardage and when you cut up. I started out with 5 full trees. I had 5 full tree blocks done like this. Then I chopped them. When I sewed them back together, I only had 4 finished tree blocks. And here was my 4th block that was going to go on here. The only problem is, because of the way I placed them back together in the randomness, this tree block was a full 2 inches in width less than what these were. So I ended up only using these. But if you're doing a large quilt, it's not going to matter. You're definitely going to have enough randomness there that you can find a place for all your blocks. And that's how you put it together, and there's just so many possibilities for this. I am doing another video that's totally with pictures, and it'll have my voice explaining each part of the process again. I'm also going to explain how I did the trapunto on these trees on the wall hanging, and we'll talk about a few other small things that had to do with this, like alternatives for your sashings and your bindings on this, or just coloration for different projects. Maybe you want to do a totally Christmas or a totally boy one, or maybe seasonal looking trees. And I'll also show you how to do one tree block on its own, because that is entirely different. If you use this method to do 1 or 2 tree blocks, you would waste a ton of fabric, because as you can see, just one 10 by 10 inch square left me with one stack of 5 10 by 10. Well, that's enough to do 5 tree blocks. So go ahead and watch the other video as well, and I'll explain like I said in more detail how to get this all put together. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a great day.